Tonight, I wanted to start by sharing a few stories from history as they relate to today. But this is not going to be a history lecture. I don't have those credentials. And there probably won't be a pop quiz at the end, because these stories are landmarks in my story of home, parts of our past that are particularly meaningful to my present. 1865. A mere 38 days after becoming incorporated, our little hamlet of Seattle, at the time governed by 5 white property owner men, some with names you actually might recognize: Yesler, Denny, Terry. They decided that one of the first acts of their leadership would be to pass an ordinance, Ordinance Number 5. Ordinance Number 5 mandated the removal of all Native Americans within Seattle's limits. Basically, what it meant was that the place that was once known as their home was no longer. They couldn't live here. And if they had business or worked within Seattle's limits, they had to be out by sundown or face arrest. 1972. David Neff, gay activist and one of the founders of Seattle Pride, started one of Seattle's first gay community centers in Capitol Hill with a few friends. It was no more than a year later when an arson burned it down. It was the next morning when David and his friends were rummaging through the home, trying to find salvageable items and placing everything that was usable back on the front lawn, that David actually remembers a neighbor lady walking by, and she said, "It's too bad all you faggots weren't still in there." 2015, I became the first queer Native American elected as president of the Capitol Hill Community Council. The same Capitol Hill Community Council who lobbied the city not to grant David and his friends a new permit to rebuild the next community center. See, I used to think these stories spoke to me because they illustrated a sense of resistance, a fight. Certainly qualities that I draw strength from as a queer Native American in Seattle in 2015. But it wasn't enough. There were more to these stories that I still had to learn. This year, my identity, my sense of home were ripped from me when someone I considered a friend sexually assaulted me. At first, I didn't plan on telling anyone about the sexual assault he perpetrated on me. I thought maybe I'll just plan to, prescribe myself a daily treatment of denial, depression, anger, fear, sadness. I realized early on that violence and oppression can separate us from ourselves, our body, our home. We were out of town on a fellowship to learn about politics. And one evening, after dinner and a round of drinks, the 4 of us who were assigned to a room returned to the hotel. We laughed, we recalled memories, we were just getting really excited about the next day's presentation. Shortly thereafter, we fell asleep, 2 to a bed. It was early in the morning hours when I awoke feeling him close to me. Close to me like how my partner gets close to me. At first, I was confused. I was still in the fog of sleep. I, at this point, had convinced myself that maybe it was just a bad dream, or maybe it was just innocent movements in his sleep. But he got closer. He began colonizing parts of my body reserved for my partner. I froze, and he began his forced migration of me from my body, taking away my identity, my sense of home. Thankfully, at this point, the other 2 were moving around in their sleep. It stirred him, and he shifted away. He must have waited until he felt like they were quiet enough, and he tried again. It was the second time he assaulted me that I knew that it was not just innocent movements in his sleep anymore. This was sexual assault. He was forceful and relentless in claiming my body. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. He was awake. He was talking. His hands felt like fire on my body. He was the arsonist trying to burn down my home within. I became a refugee from my own body. I still haven't figured out what it was within me. I felt like I needed to just do something. So I did the first thing I could think of, which was to just start talking. I normally like to just do that. And so I just started talking about my new puppy, Maya. I started talking about my partner, Derek. I started talking about my 2 younger brothers. I hoped that if I could just tell him about the stories of the people that I loved, the people that loved me, maybe he would just stop himself. He didn't. I eventually just said, no, this has to stop, and I ran to the bathroom, barricading myself in until everybody had gone down to the first presentation. When I finally was able to get myself ready, show up for the first presentation, sat in that room surrounded by many people, but had never felt more alone or isolated or scared. But I had a flashback, actually, of a time I was in junior high. I got to go to summer camp, and one of the outdoor kind of ropes course trust activities was this very large pole, kind of like a telephone pole. And you climb a ladder, and you start climbing the pegs, and at the top, you stand on a platform about this size. And you're supposed to jump, catch onto a bar just right out in front of you and swing, and then, be a little fearless and drop down and trust that everything's going to be okay. And certainly for the first 5 minutes, people really trusted that I was going to walk up and just jump. It was 45 minutes later when I just couldn't find it within me to do anything, so I slithered my way back down, peg by peg, down that ladder. And I know that the reason that memory came up was because it reminded me that I needed to be the person I needed when I was younger. I needed to be fearless. I needed to be courageous. So I took a leap. I dared to believe it could be me, and I texted a friend, and I just said, call me, need your help. And it started a journey of healing and recovery that I still am on today. See, I used to think those stories from history spoke to me because they illustrated a sense of resistance, a fight. But what I've come to learn is that they actually speak to me because they are actually about resilience. Since the incident, I've had the realization that, in fact, because of resilience, you can't take home away from the Native American community because we all own it together. You can't take home away from the LGBTQ community because our movement is too strong. You can't just burn us down. And you certainly can't take home away from me because I am the survival of my people. I am the result of the continued struggle for equality. And I am my mother's son and all those who've come before me. These events are my story, not as a burden to bear, but what gives me the strength to take that first leap. And a part of that is tonight. So for that, I'm grateful to all of you, because now you are a part of my story of resilience. Another step in rebuilding my home in a story of stories. Thank you.